A woman's body does not respond the way most men assume it does. It does not operate like a switch that turns on the moment there is physical contact or permission. Instead, it functions more like a system that requires alignment between the mind, emotions, and physical state. If that alignment is missing, the body may still participate, but it does not fully open. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Because from the outside, everything may appear normal, but internally, there can be hesitation, tension, or emotional distance that goes completely unnoticed. Emotional safety is the foundation of that alignment. Without it, the body instinctively holds back, even if the person consciously chooses to move forward. Safety here does not just mean the absence of danger. It means feeling seen, respected, and understood in a way that allows the nervous system to relax. When that happens, the body naturally becomes more responsive, more sensitive, and more receptive. This is not something that can be forced or accelerated. It develops through the way a man shows up before anything physical even begins. Tone of voice, patience, eye contact, attentiveness. These are not small details. They are signals that the brain interprets to decide whether it is safe to open or necessary to stay guarded. If those signals are inconsistent, rushed, or self-focused, the body may comply, but it will not fully engage. And over time, repeated experiences like this create a pattern where intimacy feels less fulfilling, even if both people cannot clearly explain why. What makes this more complex is that many women themselves struggle to articulate this difference. They may not say that they felt partially closed or emotionally disconnected. Instead, it shows up subtly in reduced enthusiasm, less responsiveness, or a gradual decline in desire. From the outside, it may look like a loss of interest, but in reality, it is often the result of repeated moments where emotional safety was not fully established. When a woman does feel safe, the shift is unmistakable. Her body relaxes, her responses become more natural, and there is a sense of ease that cannot be faked. There is no need to overthink or manage the moment. Everything flows more freely because the internal resistance is gone. This is the state where intimacy becomes deeper, not because of what is being done, but because of how it is being experienced. Understanding this changes everything. It shifts the focus away from trying to impress or perform and toward creating an environment where openness can happen naturally. It requires awareness, patience, and a genuine interest in her experience, not just the outcome. And when that shift happens, intimacy stops being something that is simply done and becomes something that is genuinely shared. Presence is one of those things people assume they understand, but very few actually practice, especially in intimate moments. Most men believe that being physically there is enough, that showing up, initiating, and participating automatically means they are present. But presence is not about proximity. It is about where your attention is, where your awareness is, and whether the person with you can feel that you are truly engaged with them, not lost in your own thoughts. In those moments, many men are not as present as they think. Their focus is split. Part of them is thinking about performance, about lasting long enough, about whether they are doing things right, or about how they are being perceived. That internal noise pulls attention away from the one place it needs to be on her. And even if nothing is said, that absence is felt. A woman can sense when a man is with her physically, but not fully there mentally or emotionally. It creates a subtle disconnect that changes the entire experience. Presence in its real form is quiet but powerful. It shows up in how you pay attention to her breathing, her movements, the small shifts in her body that communicate comfort or tension. It's the difference between reacting automatically and responding intentionally. When a man is truly present, he is not rushing, not forcing momentum, not trying to control the outcome. He is tuned in. He adjusts naturally because he is actually noticing what is happening, not just going through a mental script. What makes presence so impactful is that it directly affects how safe she feels. When your attention is steady and focused, it signals that you are aware, that you are engaged, that you are not disconnected or distracted. That awareness translates into emotional safety, and emotional safety allows her body to relax. Without that, even if everything else is technically correct, something still feels off. The experience becomes mechanical instead of connected. There is also a deeper layer to this. When a man is fully present, it removes pressure from the moment. He is not chasing an outcome or trying to prove anything. That shift changes the energy entirely. Instead of feeling like something that needs to be achieved, the moment becomes something that is shared, and that shared experience is what creates depth. It's what makes the difference between something that is simply physical and something that actually feels meaningful. The challenge is that presence requires letting go of control. It requires stepping out of your own head and into the moment as it is, not as you think it should be. That's uncomfortable for a lot of men because it means releasing the constant need to monitor themselves. But that's exactly what allows connection to happen, because the more you focus on yourself, the less you are able to connect with the person in front of you. When presence is missing, even strong attraction cannot fully compensate for it. But when presence is there, even simple moments feel deeper, more connected, and more real. It's not about doing more. It's about being fully there in what you are already doing, with your attention undivided and your awareness grounded in her experience as much as your own. Consistency in intimate moments is one of the most misunderstood and underestimated factors in how deeply a woman experiences connection and pleasure. Most men think improvement comes from changing techniques, trying different approaches, or adding variety at the right time. But in reality, one of the most powerful elements is not change at all. It is stability. What is working in a moment is often far more important than what could be added to it. When a woman reaches a state of deep arousal and responsiveness, her body is not reacting randomly. It is responding to a specific rhythm, pressure, pace, and pattern that has gradually built up over time. Her nervous system becomes synchronized with that experience. It starts to anticipate what comes next, and that anticipation is part of what deepens sensation. In that state, even small changes can disrupt that rhythm. A sudden shift in speed, angle, or intensity can pull her out of that flow, not because the change is wrong, but because the system was already tuned to something else. This is where many men unintentionally interrupt the very moment they are trying to enhance, out of excitement, instinct, or the belief that doing more will create a stronger response. They adjust. They increase intensity when things are already working, or they introduce variation at a moment when the body is actually asking for continuity. What feels like an improvement from the outside can feel like a disruption from the inside. The continuity that was building gets reset, and the depth that was forming can weaken. Consistency is not about rigidity or repetition without awareness. It is about recognizing when the body is responding well and allowing that state to continue without unnecessary interruption. It requires attention, not assumption, because the only way to know what should stay the same is to actually observe what is working in real time. This is where emotional awareness becomes just as important as physical action. You are not following a script. You are responding to signals. The deeper reason consistency matters is because arousal is cumulative. It builds layer by layer. Each phase depends on the stability of the previous one. Once the body reaches a certain level of engagement, it does not need constant stimulation changes. It needs continuity to deepen the existing response. When that continuity is maintained, the experience intensifies naturally without force. It becomes smoother, more immersive, and more connected. This is also where emotional pressure often creates mistakes. When a man feels that he needs to make something happen, he becomes more likely to intervene unnecessarily. But the paradox is that the more you try to force improvement in a moment that is already working, the more likely you are to break the natural progression that is unfolding. Trusting the moment becomes more effective than controlling it. Consistency also communicates something deeper on a psychological level. It signals attentiveness and stability. It shows that you are not distracted by your own impulses or constantly shifting focus to chase intensity. That steadiness contributes to emotional safety, which reinforces physical openness. The body responds not only to physical input, but to the predictability and calmness of the person providing it. When consistency is understood and applied correctly, it changes the entire dynamic. Instead of a fragmented experience made up of adjustments and interruptions, intimacy becomes a continuous flow. And in that flow, the experience becomes more connected, more grounded, and more deeply felt, without needing escalation or exaggeration. What happens after intimacy is often treated like an afterthought, but in reality, it is one of the most emotionally significant parts of the entire experience. Many people assume that once the physical moment is over, everything resets back to normal. But the body does not work that way. Neither does emotional memory. What happens in the minutes after closeness can shape how the entire experience is remembered, felt, and internalized. In that post-intimacy state, the body is still under the influence of neurochemical changes. Hormones associated with bonding, safety, and emotional connection remain active. This is not just theory or romantic interpretation. It is a real physiological state where emotional sensitivity is higher and attachment signals are stronger. That means whatever happens during this window carries more weight than it would in ordinary moments. Words feel deeper, silence feels louder, presence feels more meaningful. This is why attention after intimacy matters just as much as attention during it. When a man remains emotionally and physically present, without immediately withdrawing or shifting into distraction, it creates a sense of continuity. It tells the nervous system that what just happened was not isolated or mechanical. It was part of a shared experience that still continues. That continuation builds emotional security in a subtle but powerful way. On the other hand, when there is a sudden shift, when attention disappears, when distance is created, when the emotional tone changes too quickly, the nervous system interprets that contrast. It may not be conscious, but it is recorded. The body notices when closeness is followed by detachment too abruptly. Over time, that pattern can reduce openness, even if everything else in the relationship feels stable. Not because of one moment, but because of repetition. Presence after intimacy does not require effort or performance. In fact, it is the absence of performance that makes it powerful. It is about staying grounded, calm, and emotionally available without trying to move on too quickly. Even simple things like staying close, maintaining a relaxed atmosphere, or not rushing into external distractions create a sense of emotional completion rather than abrupt ending. This period is also where emotional interpretation happens. A woman is not only processing the physical experience, but also how she was treated during and after it. Her nervous system is asking subtle questions. Was I valued? Was I respected? Was I emotionally met, or just physically engaged with? The answers to those questions are not given through words alone, but through behavior in those quiet moments afterward. What makes this even more important is that memory is not formed only in peak moments, but in transitions. How something begins and how it ends often determines how it is remembered more than the middle itself. That means the emotional tone after intimacy becomes part of the lasting imprint of the experience. It influences trust, comfort, and future openness in ways that are not immediately visible, but deeply felt over time. When presence continues after intimacy, something subtle but important happens. The experience feels complete, instead of fragmented. There is no sense of emotional drop or sudden separation. Instead, there is continuity, calmness, and stability. And that stability becomes the foundation on which deeper connection is built in the future. Emotional safety is not created in a single moment, and it is not something that can be declared or assumed. It is built through repeated experiences where a woman's nervous system learns that she does not need to protect herself in your presence. In intimate moments, this becomes even more important because physical closeness amplifies emotional sensitivity. What might feel like a simple interaction on the surface is actually a deeply processed experience internally. When a woman feels emotionally safe, her body behaves differently. It relaxes more easily. It responds without resistance. There is less internal tension and more natural openness. This is not about compliance or agreement. It is about the absence of defense. The body does not stay guarded when it senses that it is not under emotional threat. An emotional threat is not always dramatic. It can be subtle. It can be uncertainty, inconsistency, lack of attention, or feeling unseen in small but repeated ways. Many men underestimate how quickly the nervous system evaluates safety. It is constantly scanning for cues, tone of voice, patience, attention, consistency, and emotional presence. These cues are not analyzed logically, they are felt, and once the nervous system decides whether it feels safe or not, it begins to regulate how open or closed the body becomes in response. That regulation is not fully conscious. It happens beneath awareness. Emotional safety also determines depth of experience. When safety is present, the mind does not need to divide attention between pleasure and protection. That division is what often creates partial experiences, where physically something is happening, but emotionally there is still a layer of caution. When that caution is absent, the experience becomes fuller, more immersive, and more connected. Not because anything external has changed, but because internal resistance has dropped. One of the most important aspects of emotional safety is consistency over time. A single moment of care is not enough to establish trust in the nervous system. It looks for patterns. It observes whether your behavior is stable or unpredictable, whether your attention is reliable or conditional, whether your presence is steady or dependent on mood and situation. Over time, those patterns either create relaxation or maintain guardedness. Another overlooked factor is how emotional safety is affected by intention. A woman can often sense whether she is being treated as a whole person or as a temporary experience. When she feels reduced to a moment or a function, even subtly, her nervous system adjusts. When she feels seen as a complete person, not just in physical terms, but emotional and relational terms. Her ability to relax increases significantly. That shift is not about words, it is about how consistently she feels acknowledged beyond the physical interaction. Emotional safety is also deeply tied to how pressure is managed. Pressure to respond, pressure to perform, pressure to maintain momentum, all of these create internal tension. Even if unspoken, they influence how freely the body can respond. When pressure is replaced with patience, the system begins to shift. The body does not need to anticipate or defend. It can simply experience. Ultimately, emotional safety is the foundation that allows everything else to become more natural. Without it, even positive experiences can feel partially restricted. With it, the same experiences feel deeper, more open, and more connected, without needing anything to be forced or exaggerated. Pace is one of the most underestimated elements in intimacy, yet it often determines whether the experience feels connected or fragmented. Many men focus on intensity, assuming that stronger or faster means better. But the body does not interpret intensity alone as pleasure. It responds to timing, rhythm, and the ability to gradually adapt. When pace is rushed, the body is forced to adjust too quickly, and that adjustment often comes with tension instead of relaxation. A slower beginning allows the nervous system to align with what is happening. The body needs time to interpret signals and respond appropriately. When movement begins gradually, it creates space for awareness to build rather than shock the system into reaction. That gradual entry into rhythm is what allows comfort to develop. Comfort is not passive, it is the foundation for deeper responsiveness. Without it, even strong attraction cannot fully translate into a fulfilling experience. When pace is too fast from the beginning, the body is not given time to prepare. Muscles may still be partially engaged, sensitivity may not be fully activated, and emotional readiness may still be developing. In that state, movement can feel like pressure rather than flow. The difference is not always visible, but it is deeply felt internally. What could have been a smooth transition becomes something that requires adjustment instead of enjoyment. As the experience continues, maintaining a steady rhythm becomes just as important as starting slowly. The body begins to synchronize with repetition. It anticipates movement, responds more easily, and settles into a pattern that feels natural. If that rhythm is interrupted too often or changed without awareness, the sense of continuity breaks. The nervous system has to reset, and that reset reduces depth. What was building gradually loses momentum. A controlled pace also allows emotional awareness to stay present. When everything is rushed, attention narrows. Focus shifts toward urgency, performance, or outcome. But when pace is steady, awareness expands. There is more space to notice reactions, shifts in breathing, and subtle changes in response. That awareness is what allows adjustments to happen naturally instead of reactively. It becomes a dialogue without words. Another important aspect of pace is how it affects trust in the moment. When a woman feels that things are unfolding gradually and not being forced forward, her body is more likely to remain open. There is no need to resist or brace. Instead, there is a sense of being carried by the rhythm rather than pushed by it. That distinction changes everything about how the experience is felt internally. Pace also influences emotional interpretation. A rushed experience can feel disconnected even if attraction is strong. A steady, controlled pace creates a sense of being valued enough not to be rushed. It communicates attentiveness without words. The nervous system interprets that as care, and care translates into relaxation. Relaxation is what allows deeper sensation to be fully experienced rather than partially filtered. The most common mistake is changing pace based on internal urgency rather than external response. When attention shifts inward toward performance or anticipation, the natural rhythm is disrupted. But when attention stays on how the body is responding, pace adjusts itself naturally. It becomes less about control and more about alignment with what is already working. When pace is understood correctly, it stops being about speed altogether. It becomes about timing, awareness, and responsiveness. And in that state, intimacy feels less like something being done, and more like something unfolding naturally between two people who are actually attuned to each other. Awareness in intimacy is not about doing more, it is about noticing more. Most men assume that physical effort defines quality, but in reality, the deepest difference comes from how much attention is directed toward the other person instead of inward thoughts. When awareness is low, actions become mechanical. When awareness is high, even simple actions become meaningful because they are guided by real-time understanding rather than assumption. Many people enter intimate moments with a focus on themselves without realizing it. Thoughts about performance, timing, or outcome quietly take over attention. This internal focus creates a kind of emotional blindness. The body may still be active, but perception becomes limited. Subtle signals from the other person are missed or misread. And when those signals are missed, the connection becomes less responsive, even if everything appears fine externally. True awareness begins when attention shifts outward. It means noticing how the other person is breathing, how their body is reacting, how their energy is shifting moment by moment. These are not dramatic signals, they are subtle. A slight change in stillness, a shift in rhythm, a difference in engagement. When attention is tuned to these details, interaction becomes responsive rather than automatic. This level of awareness changes the entire structure of the experience. Instead of following a fixed idea of what should happen next, each moment becomes guided by what is actually happening. That creates adaptability. And adaptability is what allows intimacy to feel connected rather than scripted. It removes guesswork and replaces it with real-time understanding. Without awareness, even good intentions can lead to misalignment. A person may think they are doing the right thing, but if they are not observing the response, they are relying on assumption rather than feedback. And assumption is where disconnect begins. What feels right from one perspective may not match what is being experienced on the other side. Awareness bridges that gap. Another important aspect of awareness is emotional perception. It is not only about physical signals, but also about emotional shifts. Energy can change even when nothing outwardly obvious happens. A slight withdrawal, a moment of hesitation, or a change in presence can indicate that something needs to slow down, adjust, or stabilize. These shifts are often small, but they are significant. When awareness is strong, pressure naturally decreases. There is less need to force outcomes or control direction. Instead, there is a sense of flow guided by response. This reduces internal tension and creates more space for connection to develop naturally. It also helps prevent unnecessary interruptions, because actions are based on real feedback rather than anticipation. Awareness also strengthens trust over time. When a person consistently responds to subtle cues, it communicates that they are attentive and present. That attentiveness builds emotional security, and emotional security allows deeper openness. The body and mind both relax more easily when they feel understood without needing to explain everything explicitly. Ultimately, awareness transforms intimacy from something that is performed into something that is experienced together in real time. It replaces assumption with observation and replaces routine with responsiveness. And in that shift, connection becomes more authentic, more stable, and more deeply felt without needing anything exaggerated or forced.